to be involved in the development process, like physically. Because when you add a feature, you have to kind of build it, and so it forces you to focus on the things that are really, really important. And
not get the stress that maybe you're taking.
Not to where we are, yeah. Yeah.
So what was your minimum viable product? Being that you're a startup, the company's kind of new, what was the thing that you wanted to bring to market and bring to market maybe the best?
I think like really what differentiates us, I guess, to step back a little bit, like I think there are a lot of job boards out there, and I didn't want to build another job board because the problem is almost that there are too many job boards out there. I wanted to build a way to parse that information for people, for the average person to like be able to digest that information. And so our minimal viable product was building a tool that simply let you search all of the different great resources that are already out there. And like a common misconception, I would say, is that people think that, or I guess when you look at what we built, you might think that, well, maybe we built it because there aren't good job boards out there. But there are a lot of great job boards out there, and there are plenty of jobs out there. The problem is finding them. And so that's why I built Contenta, and that was our minimal viable product, simply building something that let writers search across all of these sites basically instantly.
And while you're not a professional writer necessarily, your wife is a journalist, and you have worked in the industry a long time hiring a lot of writers. So I think that what would be a really valuable use of our time today is exploring kind of what you've seen not working and what you've seen working well. And the fact that, and this is a double question, so excuse me, but the fact that your wife is a writer, did that play into your decision to have this be a project you wanted to bring to market?
It did. I think really that, and the fact that when I sold my previous business, I really honestly, I thought it would be awesome, and then after 3 days I was bored. So, and I needed to find something to do, and the first problem I really came across was helping the buyer of I owned a network of financial websites, and we hired a lot of writers, and I was helping him hire writers, and I was just amazed at how it hadn't really progressed in the 5 or 6 or maybe 7 years that I was involved in that business. The way that you found writers basically remained the same. And for the writers, it was just there was a massive pain point there where you had to go to these archaic job boards that a lot of them were created 10 years ago and weren't really catered towards remote work. And you had to sort through all this stuff. And so really, that was really actually kind of the first problem I came across, and I was kind of going crazy at the time. Just really, not necessarily having a lot to do. So I thought, this is a problem that I can solve, and it's a very real problem. And actually, if it's a problem for writers, it's probably a problem for many different remote, jobs and remote jobs in particular. So I thought I could start with we could start with writers because I knew that was a serious problem. Solve that, and then kind of start to look at other areas. So that's kind of how it all came to place.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Kevin's, maybe not a professional writer, but he's actually a great writer. And you write for the blog, right? And you write the newsletters that come out and stuff?
Right. I basically, between myself and my brother, we basically do everything. So, okay. So I write for our blog posts. And I actually have a blog about startups that I don't update frequently, but a lot of the stuff is kind of evergreen content or content that never really gets old. So and that's startupworkout.com. And I talk a lot about startups. I do have experience blogging and stuff like that.
Nice.
Through.
And Kevin helped me put together a freebie for today called 3 Ways to Supercharge Your Pitch and Land Better Clients. If you would like that, you can text in Happy Friday, which is one word, to 33444. Again, Happy Friday to 33444, and you can get a copy of 3 Ways to Supercharge Your Pitch and Land Better Clients. Great tips, actionable, something you can put into practice today. So we have some questions from a couple of my Facebook groups. Do you care if we dig on into them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
So let's start. I think this is a really good question. This was from Joe Dighton, and he's kind of the pitching king in our little community of 30 days or less to freelance writing success, because he can send out a lot of pitches. And I'm sure he doesn't want to keep up having to do that, and part of his goal is probably to get into some better paying niches. So his question is, I was wondering, how do you pitch within a niche that you want to write for, but you don't have any samples or experience? I'd love to get into financial writing, for example.
I would say, start a blog, start your own blog. I think that's huge, and anybody can do it, and it basically costs no money to do it, or very little money. And I would say B, I guess one of the things actually that surprised me the most about starting Contenta is that I thought that, you would think that it would be really skewed towards like the people that would get the jobs are the people with the most experience, but it's really not. Like we actually get like a lot of like success story emails and stuff like that. And what I found interesting was the people that email us, a lot of them are just starting out. I think a lot of it is about like finding creative ways to develop a relationship with the client, and just going kind of above and beyond what everybody else does. So, I think in the freebie that we're giving out, one of the things, not to spoil it, but one of the things that I talk about is like writing a sample, and how everybody, I like actually mentioning this on our webinars because everybody like gasps at writing a sample, because they assume that I mean that you need to go out and write a free sample.
Right.
But I'm actually not saying that. A lot of the most successful writers that I know, they offer to write a sample, and they actually end up getting paid for it. And I think that's a great way to create to initiate essentially like a relationship with the client that you're trying to court, if that makes sense. I think a lot of people, they'll just send their like resume and like expect for the person, expect for the whoever's doing the hiring to just respond and hire them immediately. But like you need to like go out of your way to court them, and also like find creative ways to get that conversation started, because once it's kind of like when you're fishing, you need the hook. Once you hook them, then you can kind of reel them in. So writing a sample is a great way to do that, and a lot of times you can actually, like, companies are happy to pay for samples, but so I don't think you should assume that necessarily just because you're writing a sample you're not going to get paid for it.
Yeah, I have 2 things to add to that. One would be, I kind of call that a trial process, and that's how I start every client relationship. And part of it is selfish, because I want to make sure that they're the right fit for me, because there's some nightmare clients out there, and you don't always spot it right away. So I want to make sure that they're as good of a fit for my business as I am for them. But I think it's just a really low risk, low pressure way to start a relationship with somebody. So, okay, we're just agreeing to this first article, and if you like my writing, then we'll continue on from there. So I call it a trial. You're calling it a sample, but I think it's similar.
As far as dating, probably a good word for it. Dating.
Say that again.
I said, or dating.
Dating your clients. It's okay to date your clients, according to Kevin.
You do a little bit of dating, so that's, I think, a good way to look at it.
Awesome. The other thing that I wanted to share is one of the most creative kind of pitches that I've heard about is somebody kind of in my community had actually sent me a Twitter message, and she asked my advice about submitting a pitch to a ProBlogger ad. And on this ProBlogger ad, they were just stressing that they wanted unique and creative and an individual and humor and all of these different things. And so what she ended up doing, and this was for blog writing, is she crafted her pitch as a blog post, and she got the job. And I thought that that was just phenomenal, and it was it showed that she was thinking outside the box. It showed that she wanted to put in some extra effort. It wasn't super long, but it was just in the way that it was structured and formatted. And like I said, she landed the gig, so it paid off.
Yeah, I think just going kind of the extra, like putting in that little bit of extra effort is huge. And like so many people, just from my experience, and I've hired a lot of writers, and it's just amazing how many of them, it's like almost like an automated process for them. It's like they see a job, they just almost copy and paste the same email and send it in. And I think if you just put in the extra, it doesn't even take that long, like the extra 5 or 10 minutes to craft an email that's customized to the person you're trying to court or the company you're trying to court, that's huge. And you're instantly, in the top 10%. So
there's nothing wrong with starting with that draft email. That's something that I teach students in the course. Like, let's perfect our pitch and have that ready as a draft in your email. And you can start with that. But then, like Kevin said, take that 5 extra minutes of recon on their website to see what they're all about and make some kind of authentic connection with them. I get pitched all the time. I'm sure you probably do too, especially when it comes to like your website could be doing so much better. And I get called Dear Sir a lot. So they don't spend any time on my website to figure out that I'm a lady.
Or they spell your name wrong or something, so yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, good. We'll move on to the next question, but I thought that was a good answer. We're looking for subject line advice, especially for cold pitches. So when we talk about cold pitches, I'm sure you know what that means, but just so everybody's on the same page, that would be you reaching out to a company, a blogger, what have you, that has not solicited a job ad. So they're not necessarily posting one for hire. Do you have any recommendations on what a good subject line is to increase open rates of cold pitches?
Hey.
Just hey?
Just hey. Actually, it's incredible. It has such a high open rate. I've tested so many different subject lines, and the one that has if you're going for the highest open rate, the one that has the highest open rate almost every single time is just hey. It's incredible.
Do you feel like that because everybody wants to get a fun email, like a friend email in their inbox, or why do you think that is?
I think because, I think that's exactly why, because they think it's coming from somebody that either they know or a friend, or I think with anybody, there's this level of when you're meeting somebody for the first time, especially through anything digital, there's almost this wall that goes up. And your mission as a writer or as a marketer or whatever is to break through that wall and to find creative ways to get through that, because it's just everybody does it naturally. It's basic psychology. And for me, at least, it's just amazing, the people that I have gotten to respond and to do certain things by just with a subject line as simple as hey. And I think it's because people don't expect that, they don't feel like they're being sold. They don't feel like they're going to be sold on something. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Our audience is slightly disagreeing. They're saying that it looks Spanish and that they would delete it if it was somebody they didn't know. I think that, the subject line is the first thing, but then the intro is definitely as important to get them reading it and not feeling like it's spam. How I've personally been successful with that in the past is using that first line rather than introducing me and who I am and what I can do. I try to make some kind of authentic connection with them. Like, hey, I just hopped over to your blog from Pinterest, maybe even citing a specific pin or a blog post. Definitely taking the time to read, if it's a company, what is their mission or their about page, because that's a nugget of information. One of the ones I sent off recently, it was a financial startup, and they served the underbanked. And that was kind of my connection with them because, I feel strongly about that personally. And so I was able to capitalize on that. And it wasn't about, lying or making something up. It was something that I felt an authentic connection with. And then I just pointed that out. And I think that helped to start the conversation. So that's one way that you can be, I guess, non-spammy. How does a simple subject line like, hey, work against spam filters? Do you have any idea, Kevin? I don't.
I think it actually gets through the spam filters because it's not like the more that you put in a subject line, the more likely it is to get flagged, especially if you use like crazy characters and stuff like that. But for me personally, I mean, it does go against all of your like almost like your preconceived notions. But for me, I used to run like a startup incubator, and we actually did like a weekly event every week, and we would invite a different startup leader to come and speak every week. And some of these people were, like the heads of billion-dollar companies. And every week I would just use the word, I would send out this kind of the same email, but I would use that subject line, hey, and it got through almost every time. So it does work, but I think it's kind of counterintuitive in the fact that you would think that it wouldn't work. And I think also, like, it depends on what you're doing with it. Like if you're applying for a job and that job has specific instructions on how to apply, so it says use this subject line, use that subject line. Do not go and use hey. Follow the instructions to a T. But
you typically wouldn't use hey when you're doing like a job board pitch. That would be maybe more of like a cold pitch, right? Or
exactly. So it wouldn't be exactly. So it wouldn't be if you're applying for a job through a job board. It's probably not a great idea to use the word hey. But if you're trying to get in touch with somebody who's hard to access, that's a great way to do it because it gets through, basically everything. And people are they're always going to open that because the curiosity factor almost exceeds everything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally get that. As far as like a job board subject line, so if they're not instructing you on what to put in the ad itself, typically what I've done in the past is either RE, blogger position or financial planning blogger or whatever it was listed in as a category or how they presented it. And then I used to tack on my name in parentheses after that because I wanted my email to be like easily found. Even though my email is from ginahorkey@gmail.com, I still wanted them to know like I'm taking that extra effort so that you know exactly who I am. Is that a good thing, bad thing, any preference?
No, I think it's a good thing. And
you can disagree with me.
I agree with you.
Okay.
And it looks like so again, I want to stress that if you're applying for a job through a job board, you don't necessarily want to use my secret method for getting your emails open using the word hey. But if you are trying to get access to somebody who is hard to get access to, it's incredibly effective, and I think you'll probably be surprised at how effective it is.
For sure. So I have another really good question, and I'd be curious to know your answer to it. So if you're applying to a job ad and they're asking you to fill out a form or an application on their website, can you follow up with them? What's the best way to follow up with them? Recently we've been talking about it's better to pitch somebody 10 times or 10 people 10 times than to pitch 100 people once.
Yeah, exactly. You absolutely want to follow up. That's something that a lot of people don't do, and I think is crucial. And there's actually an awesome plugin for Google Chrome called Streak, which is like a CRM or essentially allows you to track like how many times you follow, when you emailed somebody, how many times you've emailed them. And so you can actually get a reminder after a certain length of time to go and email them again. And that's huge. So absolutely, I would say, definitely follow up.
So we use Sidekick. That's kind of a common one in our community too. And then one of the tips recently from a blog post from Renee Davis is she BCCs herself on every pitch email she sees and then saves it in a follow-up folder, which I think is genius. I used to manually do it, but I wouldn't BCC myself on it, so of course you would miss them in there. Joe was wondering, Streak or Sidekick, which one is better? I haven't used them both. I've only used Sidekick. You have
I've never used Sidekick. I know Streak is awesome and it's free. I'm sure they're making money somehow, but everything I've used it for, it's been free, so it's great.
Sidekick is free until you want to do too many of them. I think it's like 200 in a month or something like that. So
and it's like is that like a plugin that sits on top of Gmail, or how does Sidekick work?
Yep, it's an extension for Gmail too. So they're probably similar. Joe's trying to find a replacement for Sidekick because it's too resource heavy and it's HubSpot, and he's allergic to their products. So try Streak. See if you like it any better.
Try Streak. Again, I'm sure that there's a paid version that it eventually costs money somehow, but I've never hit it, and I've sent a lot of emails through that. So do
you have any tips when it comes to following up with the job ads that you apply through a form? Would you go and use, like I just came across a tool to find people's email addresses the other day. Would you go use a tool like that to find the right person? How would you go about it?
I mean, a lot of times for me personally, I just kind of guess the emails. I have like a lot of different ways, or a lot of different formats, but most of the time it's just like name@domainname.com. And so I've used that pretty successfully. But I think it is important to follow up, and it's actually important probably to follow up like for the foreseeable future, because eventually if they do hire somebody, that person's going to leave, or they're going to be looking to expand and have another opening. And I think, again, just continuing to build that relationship like is never a bad thing. So that would be my advice. Just like, get Streak or get Sidekick set up and have this kind of list of leads and just follow up for the foreseeable future.
I agree. We're nearing the end of our time here, but if you have a couple extra minutes, I'd like to pick your brain about a couple more things. Do you?
I do.
Okay. So one of the things that I promote heavily is pitching, because that's the one activity that you can control in helping you to get more clients. Do you have a magic number for how many pitches the average person should send in a week or a month in order to get results?
I don't. I think it depends on a lot of different things, but I don't have a magic number now.
Okay. If anybody wants a magic number, I used to do 10 when I was working full time and trying to build my freelance writing business on the side. That was manageable, I guess, to me at the time and helped me to get results. I would say that whatever time you have set aside to do writing work before you have clients should be used to market your business to get clients. So that's kind of my rule of thumb, and something I think sometimes people miss. Like they want to get caught up with making their blog perfect and, I don't know, working on learning other things. And it becomes a distraction.
Yeah, exactly. And people don't realize that you need to be spending like 80% of your time on the marketing and 20% of your time doing all of that other stuff. I mean, that's especially when you're first starting out. And so that's huge.
Do you have any thoughts on rates? What is too cheap to work for as a writer? And obviously it probably depends on the project, but you see a lot of $20, $30, $40 jobs out there. On the other hand, I've heard as high as $1,000 per blog post. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's one of the reasons why why I created Contenta, is that it's just it was incredible to me when I started really researching everything, like the difference in rates, and that there was really not a lot of transparency there, and like as you said, some people were making literally like 2 cents a word. Some people were making less than 2 cents a word. Some people were making $5 a word. And so I think it really shows you a couple things, but I think, most of all, we wanted to create something that helped writers to gain a little bit insight into what other people are making and what's like a reasonable amount of money to make from it. And I don't know if there's a magic number. I think it does depend on the niche. It depends on the type of job. It depends on if you're working for an agency or you're working, or you're working just directly with the company. I think there are like a ton of different variables there, but I think it's important to have a little bit of insight into that, and that's part of our mission, or what we're trying to do, is to build tools that help writers see into that. So I don't know if that's necessarily an enlightening answer, but I think, you know, the truth is that it really depends on a lot of different factors.
It does, but I'm glad that you guys are working towards kind of figuring that out and making it more transparent. Joe says that he won't touch anything less than 15 cents a word. I'm currently at 25, 30 cents a word myself. I think for a beginning writer, the threshold that you should probably be working towards is 10 cents. 2 and 3 and 5 cents a word, it just ends up not being worth your time, and you're working more for minimum wage depending on how long it takes you to write and edit and format and stuff. That's my personal 2 cents. My family is about to walk through the door. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, so it's going to get loud. One last call out, if you guys wanted to text in Happy Friday, again, one word, Happy Friday, to 33444. You'll get 3 ways to supercharge your pitch and land better clients. Kevin's been on Horkey Handbook before talking more about Contenta, and he's got a lot of really great tips and resources on their blog as well. And it's contenta.co. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody, but thanks for bearing with us, and hopefully you got a nugget or two, and it was a half hour well spent. Happy Friday, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, and I hope everybody has a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.